Yeah, good afternoon or good morning, everyone, wherever you are. And thank you very much, Maria, for this kind introduction and for inviting me to the Kiel Imaging Seminar. So this is not a scientific talk. I'm not an active scientist. I'm a full-time editor. I don't know much about imaging, but the journal I am representing here publishes papers about imaging. So this is because Angewandte is a general chemistry journal. We accommodate a broad spectrum of topics, and in principle, any research that has to do with chemistry is welcome, but it should contain at least a little bit of chemistry. So, as the title here says, I would like to take you behind the scenes of a scientific journal in Angewandte Chemie and show you a bit what happens between the moment a manuscript is submitted and the moment it is accepted or rejected or revised or transferred. You know the publishing process from the authors and maybe from the referee's perspective. Fewer people see what happens on the editorial side. So my aim is to make the process more transparent and to share some practical advice. Parts of my story will be very specific about Angewandte Chemie. Other parts will be more general as they apply to almost any journal. There are actually two Angewandte journals. So the classic Angewandte here on the left side and the new launch Angewandte Chemie Novit. This talk will focus on the classic Angewandte, but I will also say a few words later about Novit. Let me briefly introduce the journal with some basic information. Angewandte Chemie was founded in 1887 under the name Zeitschrift für die chemische Industrie. Already a year later, it was then rebranded to Zeitschrift für angewandte Chemie, and the final rebranding to Angewandte Chemie without the Zeitschrift happened then in the 1950s. Angewandte Chemie, for those who don't know, translates to applied chemistry. That's all. In 1962, the international edition was launched. The launch of the international edition, of course, opened the journal for an international audience of authors and readers. The name of the journal was kept in German, as it is a brand name. To give you an impression of the size, in 25, we received more than 28,500 submissions and published over 5,000 articles. We counted 35 million article views. This translates to 70 per minute, which means that every second somebody somewhere in the world clicks on an Angewandte article. Publishing in Angewandte means your work will be highly visible. These numbers are important because they illustrate one reality of modern publishing. Competition for space and attention is extremely high. The journal is owned by the German Chemical Society, the GDCH, so Wiley is the publisher. Our editorial operation relies on more than 40 full-time editors, supported by an international network of researchers and a scientific advisory committee. The impact factor, just for the record, is 17.6, which is pretty high for a general chemistry journal. So Angewandte is a big journal, and accordingly, there's many people who contribute to running a journal in different roles. Owner is the German Chemical Society, as represented by the GDCH board. The board has nominated a so-called Angewandte Council, and we meet regularly with the council to discuss strategic matters and to set the overall course of Angewandte. The Scientific Advisory Committee helps shape editorial strategies, helps us with difficult decisions, and also selects manuscript for Angewandte Novit. I explain a little bit more about Novit in a minute. The International Advisory Board provides perspectives from a global chemistry community and help safeguard editorial integrity. For example, whenever we need an adjudicate referee because the original reviewers have conflicting opinions and the editor is uncertain, we often, not always, ask a member of the board for help. All the day-to-day operations with the manuscripts are managed by the editorial team, while the decisions on manuscripts are made by the editors. So this cooperative structure ensures that editorial decisions are not made in isolation. Here's a quick view of the team leading the journal. So Angewandte Chemie has two editors-in-chief. That's myself and Nathalie Weikenand. Charlotte Gers-Panther is the editor-in-chief of Novit. We have two executive editors and four deputy editors. Our editorial team is grouped into 4 subject groups according to the scientific backgrounds of the editors who are covering a wide range of disciplines. So most of the editors do not work exclusively for Angewandte, but are shared with 1 or 2 other journals. The subject groups we have are organic chemistry, inorganic photonics, physical and theory, energy and sustainability, and biochemistry and medicinal chemistry. So how does this work? Within the subject groups is permanent exchange. So if an editor has a question or, for example, is unsure about a manuscript or a decision, they can contact the group for support and discuss a decision in the group. This is very important for us because it ensures that editors calibrate themselves. Given the size of the team, it is imperative to have common standards. What we want to avoid is that it becomes a matter of luck for the author, which of the editors handles their papers. What we, for example, do is a so-called group evaluation. This works as follows. A manuscript is selected, and the editors in the subgroup perform a separate assessment of the paper, a bit like a reviewer report. The comments are then collected and shared among the group so that an editor can see whether the assessment was in line with the other editors. Editorial decisions therefore arise from continuous discussion, calibration, and consultation. Editors do not work in isolation. Most of the editors are still based here in Weinheim in Germany, but we have also offices in China, in India, in South Korea, and in Canada. So one recent development is Angewandte Chemie Novit. So that's our new fully open access companion journal that was launched in 2025. Novit is a low volume journal. The expectation is that we publish between 50 and 100 articles per year. When you compare this to the 5,000 articles published by the classic Angewandte, that's low volume. This means that articles published in Novit have a very high visibility. Novit is special. The idea is as follows. One cannot submit directly to Novit. In order to publish in Novit, you submit to Angewandte Chemie. Exceptional manuscripts that receive very strong evaluations may be selected then for publication in Novit. The first selection step involves the handling editor and the editor-in-chief of Novit. This is then followed by a second selection step that involves 1 or 2 members of our scientific advisory committee. Only if the advisory committee is also supportive, we offer the author an uptransfer to Novit, which is of course optional then for the author. Publishing in Novit comes with a very stringent selection process, and having a paper published there is something really special. In the second part of this presentation, I would like to talk a bit about 3 closely connected topics, so manuscript preparation, but also then manuscript evaluation and peer review, and finally a few comments on the role of artificial intelligence in scientific publishing. So publishing a paper is much more than simply presenting scientific results. It involves communicating your work effectively, selecting the right audience, convincing the editors and the peer reviewers responding to peer review, and understanding how new technologies such as AI fit into the publishing landscape. Before even writing the paper, it's important to understand the publishing landscape. Different journals serve different communities and purposes. Factors to consider include the journal scope, readership, peer review process, indexing status, open access options, data sharing policies, and overall visibility. So some researchers focus heavily on metrics such as the impact factor, but that should not be the only consideration. The key question is whether the journal reaches the audience that will benefit most from your work. Publishing is ultimately about communication. The best journal is often not the one with the highest metric, but the one where the right people will read your paper. When selecting a journal, start by thinking about your audience. Ask yourself, who should read my paper? Where will it have the greatest impact? Which journal do I regularly read? Which journals have I cited? Where are related papers published? A common mistake is selecting a journal solely based on prestige. A better approach is to consider whether the readers of that journal will immediately understand and appreciate the story you are telling. Choosing the right journal significantly increases the chances of acceptance and often improves the visibility and citation of your work. Knowing your audience helps in two important ways. First, it improves your writing. Once you know who will read your paper, you can tailor the level of technical details, the terminology, and the overall presentation. Second, it helps you to sell your story. Scientific publishing is not marketing, but it's a persuasion. Yeah? Editors and reviewers need to understand why your work matters. A clear narrative helps them appreciate its significance. The goal is always clear, direct, and targeted communication. This may sound obvious, but many problems can be avoided simply by reading the journal guidelines. Understandably, guidelines have become lengthy nowadays and probably don't need to be read over and over again, but I recommend to at least look into them and read the entire notice to authors of any journal one time in your life. The good thing is that the author guidelines and notice to authors of most of the journals are very similar. Yeah. Author guidelines contain important information about article structure, article types and lengths, and also data requirements. For example, while we are flexible with the article length, excessively long manuscripts may still be returned to the author. Following the instructions can prevent unnecessary delays during the technical check stage then. Yeah, how to start writing. Many authors struggle with where to begin. A suggestion is to write, so to say, from the inside out. So start with the data rather than the introduction. Begin by preparing your figures and tables. These represent the core evidence and supporting your conclusions. Then write the results and discussion around the figures and tables. This is often straightforward as you essentially describe what is shown. Then follows the conclusion and the introduction. The abstract and title are often easiest to write last, once the story has fully developed. So that's just a suggestion. You may try that to, so to say, write from backwards. Start with the science and finish with the summary. The title of your article is most widely read part of any paper. A good title is important. Keep in mind that thousands of papers are published every day. There's estimated 5 million scientific articles published every year. Often the title then determines whether someone clicks on a paper, reads the abstract, or moves on. A good title should be specific, concise, informative, and searchable, including important keywords early in the title improves discoverability through online search engines and databases. The title should immediately communicate what the paper is about and why it matters. Yeah. Let me showcase this with a couple of examples and how titles can be improved. Many scientific titles contain impressive sounding language but fail to communicate the main message. So when you look at this, there's two words in this title that do not belong there. The word fantastic, not at all, and whether greatly is needed is also a matter of debate here. What's missing here in this title is what is the activity good for? Yeah, so the authors probably describe sort of a catalyst for a catalytic reaction, and the title should give some hint what reaction is catalyzed here. Look at this example. It's not a bad title, but it has a little problem. There are two abbreviations here in this title that are not common when you do not work in this field. And PMS, for example, is peroxymonosulfate. You probably don't know what it stands for. If you have such kind of abbreviations in a title, you already signal to the editor and also to the reader that this is a specialized article, which is okay, but probably not suitable then for publication in a general chemistry journal such as Angewandte Chemie. Next title, also not a bad title, except that investigations on is not needed, can be deleted. Everything's an investigation on, everything's a study of. Whether toward is needed or better for is a matter of taste. One last example here, when you look at this title, Designing an Eco-Friendly Catalyst for Sustainable Use of Water Resources. We have no idea what catalyst is used, and it's not really clear what it is used for. When you look at the paper, you find out that the catalyst actually a DNA enzyme. So put that in the title. And what does the DNA enzyme do? It generates OH radical, and the OH radicals then purify the water. So this is a suggestion for a better title in this case. So good scientific writing is usually simple scientific writing. Use familiar words whenever possible. Use active voice when appropriate. Statements such as we measured or we demonstrate are often clearer than passive constructions. Avoid redundancy and unnecessary wording. The objective is not to sound sophisticated. The objective is to communicate ideas. And remember that readers appreciate clarity far more than complexity. A few words on the graphics. Figures are often the most influential part of a scientific paper. Many readers will look at the figures before reading the text. Therefore, figures must tell the story clearly. Particular attention should be paid to figure 1 or scheme 1 because these often establish the context and first impression of the work. When designing graphics, think about the 4 aspects: purpose, color, clarity, and composition. Every visual element should serve a function. Avoid unnecessary complexity. A good figure should communicate its message even before the reader reaches the corresponding text. Revision is part of the writing. Scientific writing is an iterative process. Very few papers are excellent in their very first draft. Writing, rewriting, revising, and refining are normal and essential parts of the process. One useful exercise is to view the paper from a reader's perspective. Concepts that are obvious to you may be difficult for others to understand. Feedback from colleagues can be extremely valuable because they help identify unclear explanations and hidden assumptions. So, what happens when you submit a paper to a journal? Once a manuscript has been submitted, first of all, several checks occur before the scientific evaluation even begins. It starts with a technical check. This is not performed by the editors, but by editorial assistants. We check author information, the files. Actually, we check whether the manuscript is a manuscript and not an empty page. We do a plagiarism screening. And there's a screening for machine-generated content and some other compliance requirements. A so-called duplicate check is performed on whether the manuscript had been submitted and rejected before by the same journal. Once the manuscript passed the screening, it is then assigned to an editor to evaluate the manuscript. At present, the assignments at Angewandte are performed by a selected group of editors. In the past, we tried different approaches. Some years ago, the editors-in-chief did the assignments. It was not feasible anymore because it was just too much. Then we tried sort of a semi-automated process based on keyword matches. And we also tried self-assignment for a while. But at present, we have this assignment team. The editor evaluates whether the work fits in the journal and meets basic quality criteria. Some manuscripts are desk rejected at this stage, often with a recommendation for transfer to a more suitable journal. Others proceed to peer review. The first decision of whether to send a manuscript to peer review or to make a desk rejection is a key step in the process, and we are fully aware that desk rejections are not very popular. So why do journals desk reject manuscripts without external peer review? Let's have a look at how the submissions developed over the last 35 years to understand why we have to do this. The number of submissions has increased dramatically. This is the green line that you can see here. In the year 2000, for example, this is when I started at Angewandte as an assistant editor, we received 1,800 submissions, 1,800. This is the number of submissions we are receiving now in 3 weeks. So a lot has changed in the meantime. And also already in the year 2000, we had a desk rejection rate of almost 40%. It has not dramatically increased to over 90% or so. So at the moment we are around at 65%, but we need to reject quite a number of papers before sending them to peer referees. So what do editors look for? When I evaluate a manuscript, I ask myself several questions. Does the paper fit in the journal scope? Will the readership care about the results? Is there a clear scientific story? Is the work novel and significant? These are questions I'm asking myself while looking into the paper. I do not read the entire paper from the first to the last sentence. I typically start with the summary, to get an impression what the paper is about, then jump to the introduction, and then at least check the graphics to get an impression how new the paper is, how interesting the paper is, if it's significant or maybe incremental. Editors are not searching for perfection. We are looking for potential and for convincing scientific contribution. A desk rejection does not necessarily mean that the science is poor. In most cases, it's not. It's just a matter of does the article fit in this specific journal, or are there other journals that are more suitable? So aside from technical issues or ethical concerns, common reasons to reject a paper include insufficient novelty, poor fit with the journal scope, or work that is more appropriate for a more specialized audience. As an editor, I perform a literature search for related articles, and if I find a paper that essentially, maybe with minor modifications, describes the same concept or the same reaction or the same synthesis, I will reject the paper, especially when this related work is not cited or not properly put into context. Many excellent papers receive desk rejections simply because they do not align well with a particular journal's editorial priorities. So once the editor believes that an article has potential for publication in Angewandte, the manuscript is sent into peer review. Peer review remains a cornerstone of scientific publishing. At Angewandte, we still apply the classic single-blind peer review. This is not set in stone, and we have considered other review models such as double-blind or fully transparent peer review. But for the time being, we believe single-blind, with all the disadvantages it has, is still the best solution, at least for our journal. The goal is to evaluate the validity, quality, and originality of submitted research. Peer review helps safeguard the scientific record and encourages authors to meet the standards of their disciplines. Importantly, peer review should also improve manuscripts. Constructive reviewer feedback often strengthens a study substantially before publication. How do editors identify and find reviewers? There is no set protocol for this. I may rely on my experience. I can search for authors of related publications. I can have a look at the references that are cited in the manuscript, or we can also use specialized reviewer finding tools. When selecting reviewers, we consider experience, diversity, reliability, availability, and potential conflicts of interest. We typically invite 3 or 4 reviewers initially. Whenever a reviewer declines, we invite a new reviewer. Decisions are made in most cases based on 2 or 3 reports. So what makes a good review report? A useful report does several things. It summarizes the work, it identifies the strengths and weaknesses, discusses major and minor issues, and provides a clear recommendation. The latter is important. We sometimes receive reports that discuss major and minor technical issues, but avoid a clear recommendation, such as, I recommend this paper for publication in Angewandte Chemie, or I do not recommend. Most importantly, even if a report is critical, it must be constructive. The funny examples shown here remind us that reviewers occasionally become overly creative. Always keep in mind the author or the student who did the work may not find this funny. effective peer reviewer should remain professional, respectful, and focused on the science. Importantly, reviewers can always decline a reviewer invitation. That's no problem. Even if reviewers do not respond at all, it's not a big issue because we keep track of the manuscripts and invite new reviewers after a couple of days. What the reviewer should not do, however, is to accept an invitation and then simply not deliver. Whenever a peer review process takes excessively long, this is often the main reason for it. Once the reports are back, the editor attempts to make a decision based on the reports. Sometimes the reports agree, sometimes they conflict dramatically. If the reports are conflicting, we may then invite an adjudicate referee, so oftentimes someone from our advisory board. We evaluate not only the recommendations, but also the quality and substance of the reviews themselves. Before the article gets finally accepted, we perform an image check for possible image manipulation, such as duplication. When you look at this spectrum, it seems that part of the spectrum were cut out and stitched together. Can then be found in the image check, or when you look at this, according to the figure caption, these were supposed to be two different samples, but what we can see here is that it's one and the same image. This happens not directly after manuscripts get accepted. This is just a matter of resources because it's then too many. But before we make a final acceptance of a paper, we do this image check. For most papers, the revision is a normal part of the process. Reviewer comments should always be viewed then as an opportunity to improve the manuscript. Respond carefully to every comment. If you disagree, explain your reasoning respectfully and provide evidence. Journal transfers can also be beneficial. So in many cases, so 90% of the manuscripts that we reject at Angewandte Chemie, that we offered the author a transfer to one of our sister journals. Often with the promised peer review, or if the paper had been reviewed, the same referees would be used again to check then the second version of the paper. A word on appeals. Occasionally, authors believe a decision was incorrect, and occasionally the decisions are incorrect. So every author then has the right to appeal. Appeals should always be based on scientific arguments and not on emotions. I always recommend to cool down and wait a day before writing an appeal. Appeals should be sent by email and be addressed to the editor who handled the paper. The editor can either reopen the case or consult with another editor on declining the appeal. The final word on appeals have the editors in chief. A few words about ethics in publishing. Scientific publishing functions because all participants accept certain responsibilities. Authors, for example, must present their research honestly, acknowledge prior work appropriately, and avoid practices such as plagiarism or salami slicing. Reviewers must provide objective, timely, and respectful assessments while maintaining confidentiality. Editors must ensure fair and confidential evaluation. Also, editors might have a conflict of interest that they need to declare then. Trust is the foundation of scholarly communication, and ethical conduct is essential for maintaining the trust. A few slides on AI tools in scientific publishing. Artificial intelligence, as we all know, is rapidly becoming part of the scientific research and publishing. AI-based research is very welcome in Angewandte Chemie. Here are, for example, 3 papers based on machine learning that were published in Angewandte. But this is not what I want to talk about here. From an editor's and publisher perspective, the more relevant question is how do we deal with the use of large language models in the preparation of manuscripts. These tools can assist with literature searches, language improvement, data analysis, and many other tasks. However, before using any tool, it's important to ask, what was this tool designed for? What are its limitations, and what should it not be used for? Take, for example, an axe. An axe was designed to chop wood and make fire that keeps us warm. We can play around with an axe, but caution needs to be taken that we do not harm ourselves and others. So here's an overview of our editorial policies, especially with regards to artificial intelligence in manuscript preparation. In general, it is allowed to use AI tools for text generation and for text development. However, it needs to be disclosed either in the cover letter to the editor or in the acknowledgement of the article. The final decision whether the use of AI tools to a specific purpose is acceptable rests with the editor. Yeah. The disclosure includes, for example, which tool was used and which prompts were used. Simple language improvements such as grammar checks are permitted and do not require disclosure. I nevertheless recommend to disclose in order to avoid misunderstandings. The treatment of images is a bit stricter. So AI-generated conceptual illustrations, for example, the general setup of an instrument that you're using for your report, are acceptable. AI-generated or AI-modified scientific data images are generally not permitted. One particular issue concerns peer review. Apart from some fundamental ethical considerations, there's a confidentiality issue when you upload an article on an external AI tool. As a peer reviewer, you need to treat a manuscript confidential, and at the moment you upload it, it's not confidential anymore. It's somewhere out in the wild. Yeah. So to conclude, successful publishing depends on much more than scientific results. Yeah, choosing the right journal, understanding your audience, responding constructively to peer review, adhering to ethical standards, and using AI responsibly all contribute to successful publication. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope these insights have helped you navigate the publishing process more effectively and make your next manuscript even stronger. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maaß. Yeah, first of all, I'm really impressed that you gave a kind of a small workshop on scientific writing. It was, I think, very helpful for most of the people. And yeah, I see the first question. Please, yeah, Pedro Groshevitz. Yeah,
Hi, hello.
go
Can you
ahead.
hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Maaß. Thank you very much for this overview. It was very enlightening to see more of the details on the publication process, but especially from the editorial perspective. That sounds very interesting. And with that, I have a particular question regarding the assignment of the editor. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more, how the current strategy works and how, in which ways can the author that is submitting a paper be helpful to that procedure?
Yeah. So we have these 4 subject groups here at Angewandte for organic, inorganic, physical, and medicinal, very broadly. And each of these subject teams, they have a lead and a co-lead, so to say. And within specific subjects, they assign manuscripts to editors in this group. Yeah. So every editor has a certain specialization, which is very broad at a journal as Angewandte. We have keywords, yeah, and there's then sort of a keyword match that helps us identify the ideal editor for a certain paper. Yeah, so it's a process based on knowledge because the subject group leads, they know their editors, and also based on keywords, so to say. Yeah. We plan for the future to automate this process more, also with the help of artificial intelligence, but not yet. Yeah.
Thank you. And perhaps a follow-up question on that. When creating the cover letter, would it be helpful to specify one of the subject leaders, for example, as a guide to the decision process, or just a dear editor, or is enough for that sense?
The editor is enough. I know that with other journals or other, so I think the ACS journals, you can suggest even an associate editor who handles the papers. This is typically not the case with us. Just write the editor, and that's okay.
Right. So looking forward to going through the next submission to Angewandte. Thank you.
Yeah. So other questions from the audience?
I may ask a question if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you
yes,
so much.
So far.
Yeah, that was very, very interesting insights into behind the scenes of Angewandte, and I guess many of the things apply to other journals as well. But I was impressed by, like you said, 30,000 submissions to Angewandte. How do you deal with that? Do you actually have humans looking at all submissions?
Yes, every submission is looked at. So you see, we have a big team of 40 editors. Not all work full time for Angewandte, but every editor then handles over 1,000 papers per year, which means, you have an hour or so, for this first evaluation step, to decide whether the paper is sent out to reviewers or not. It's doable, but it's quite a stretch sometimes. But every manuscript is looked at.
Yeah, that is really a commitment, right? You said like on average maybe 1 hour. Was like special reviewer finding tools. Can you comment on that?
It is more or less sort of a database that we have. So every reviewer, when you make an account as a journalist, you are asked to put in keywords, and so every reviewer has keywords, and then there's a keyword match made with the article of a paper. I have to say, these reviewer finding tools, I'm not overly convinced by it. I sometimes use it when I really struggle to find reviewers, but it's the best way to find reviewers is experience, and some you can use search functions that are not implemented within our editorial management system. We also use artificial intelligence on a very low level. That means you just put in the title, and then ask whatever you use. We typically use Copilot to suggest 5 referees. Of course, in this case, you need to be very careful and carefully check if this makes sense. What Copilot, for example, suggests. There are many different ways to find reviewers, but the built-in reviewer search function in our editorial manager system, this is what we are working with, is not the greatest, at least at the moment.
Thank you. I actually have a follow-up question here. Jan, may I, just to continue the topic, and do you consider the suggestions from the authors? So when they write in their motivation letter, if they can suggest some reviewers, how do you find it?
Yes, but the editors are asked to invite not more than one of the suggested reviewers, just to make sure that there's not a bias. Also, of course, the suggested reviewers need to be checked carefully so that they have not published with the author recently. Yeah. There's also one thing, you can suggest reviewers and you can oppose reviewers. In this case, when you oppose a reviewer, the editors are asked to definitely not use any of these reviewers. With the suggested, one of them should be used and can be used, but not all of them.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So there were other questions. Jan, do you want to continue, or we let first Pedro Groszewicz to ask the follow-up question?
I think we let the others ask questions. I can ask for hours.
Yeah, sure. Yes, please
Same
go
cases
on.
with me. The question I'd like to pose is about also indications from author, but Maaß, you answered it straight on, and the question would be whether the author submits a reviewer who you wish not to be taken into the review process, but you answered that quite clearly. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, some other questions? Check the chat.
Maybe I
Mhm.
ask a follow-up question. Do you
Yeah.
you said you keep as well track and list of the reviews? Do you like have a scoring system of you mentioned a few criteria like how good were they, how reliable are they, but how do you assess that? And do you keep track of that?
Yeah, we have the option to so to say rate the quality of the reviewer reports. It's no rocket science. Yeah, it's you put in a number, and this way you can identify reviewers who provide excellent reports. Excellent does not mean positive, but detailed reports and or reports that where you can already see that the referee knows what he's talking about. We keep record of this. And you can also identify this way referees who, yeah, repeatedly submit poor reports. This is one sentence, yeah, to get it off the table. We have this also, yeah, here and there. I think this is important, especially for the newer colleagues, that they know, which referee can be trusted and which cannot. Not every referee is excellent. Most are, many are, but we are able to keep some records. We also can keep records on whether the referee tends to be overly positive or overly negative. Referee, you send 10 papers, and 10 times they recommend acceptance, or 10 times they recommend rejection, is probably someone, yeah, you need to take into consideration, yeah, when you make a decision. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. That makes sense. I sometimes feel, or maybe two questions. Sometimes I don't know where to point people that start to peer review if there's good guidelines. And then I figure maybe it would be good if one could do like with junior people their first peer review together. But usually that is excluded. Usually, right, you should not share your peer review with others. I once asked an editor and he said, yes, you can take a junior member in for teaching how to review basically. But I wonder if you have opinion on that.
You can do that. You can, for example, include a postdoc or advanced PhD student to help with the peer review. It needs to be disclosed, and also when you then submit the report, there is a field, yeah, where you ask the question: did someone help you with this peer review? And then you should also really put in the name of that. You will be finally responsible for the content of the report, but it is allowed to share within a group, yeah, not with someone outside the group, but within your group, the manuscript. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that is very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I have a more of a general question. So do you observe like that now there are some topics that are more popular or like on a hype as compared that emerged in the last year, so the last year? Can you please comment on that?
We follow the science, yeah, and if a topic gets very popular or hyped, yeah, I've seen a lot of hypes come and go in my career. We might publish more of these papers than usually, but sometimes the hype disappears after a while, and then we publish less. So we do not direct researchers in what to do. Yeah, we follow the researchers, and if, yeah, the question why certain topics grow and decline is difficult to answer. It has to do with the funding situation and so on. But in general, we do publish hype topics. Yeah. There's always a saturation. Yeah, when you see the 1 millionth battery paper, you might not publish the next as well. But in general, hot topics are very welcome at Angewandte.
And do you maybe have some open calls currently in the journal that you could also announce? If you
Again, I
like
didn't.
open calls for some topics that can be announced or not at the moment.
Open calls we typically don't feature.
Okay.
No.
Okay. I see.
Maybe one exception, the review articles, we sometimes proactively invite, certain researchers. But for research papers, we leave it up to the community what's hot and what's not.
Yeah, I was thinking that you showed this example with machine learning, that if it's also now emerging more and more, and yeah, you're particularly interested in this kind of papers, or
Yeah, we see a lot of papers with machine learning, of course. Yeah, and this is welcome. We don't publish everything, but quite a lot.
Okay, Jan, do you have follow-up questions?
Yeah, if nobody else asks, I keep asking until we have time. You said that you do like a figure sanity check or a figure copy check that makes completely sense, I think. That's the tools that we have available nowadays. You said that you do it after the peer review. Is there a reason why you don't do it like first as an initial check to like sieve out like, how do you say that in English in a nice way? Forged images, or do you think it's more like accidental images?
It's the reason why we don't do this immediately during submission or after submission has to do with that we don't have the resources to do that. Yeah, there is some manual interference needed. There is a human who is doing this. Yeah, of course, by using tools, and we cannot check 30,000 submissions on possible figure manipulations. That means that we only check those that we are about to accept. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that if it takes efforts for 30,000, that's again, I'm very impressed with that number. You do it in the end. Do you see any development there or maybe do you see more accidentally wrong images for data, or is it like people do it on purpose, and is there a development over time? And is it very rare or mildly common?
So the examples I showed, so image duplication is rare. We don't see many such things. The question is then always, was this intentional, or has you also just mixed up two images in the supporting information? Is often difficult to decide. We typically then write to the author, say, here something's wrong. Yeah, you shown here one and the same image for supposedly two different compounds. What's going on? And then it depends on how good the explanation of the author is, if we might not accept the paper. Yeah. But it's not with every manuscript that it has a problem. It's rare, maybe 1 of 100 where we find something that needs to be followed up.
Yeah, thank you. I can see, of course, it's difficult and mistakes happen. But I like as well that you pointed out how important, for example, the first figure is to tell the story of the paper.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, and the next question, Andrew?
In fact, two questions, one a bit more specific and the other more general. And the first comes to mind is, what is the role of author seniority in academia, and how is seniority evaluated? Is there any contrast between a big shot professor with 20, 30,000 citations to someone who's starting his career? And how is this perceived in the editorial system?
So we try to treat every paper the same. Of course, we have to confess there are these unconscious biases that we all have. And when you see a paper with a Nobel laureate's name on it, you might, yeah, have a slightly different assessment of the paper than someone who has not. We try to be fair as much as we can. Something between 15 and 20% of what we publish are from first-time authors, which in most cases are young scientists. Yeah, that means we try to support as much as we can the younger generation, but ideally our aim is to treat every manuscript the same, independent of whose name is on the paper.
This is much of a relief to hear about. And the second question is more a general one. What motivates you in the role of an editor of this Angewandte journal, and what really makes your day as an editor? What are the very positive experiences you've had in this 20 plus years in editorial work?
Every day has its new story. Every day has a curious manuscript you've never seen before, a topic you've never seen before. I'm still not bored after 25 years on the job, and I still believe that we do a service there to the community and to science itself. And I'm really convinced that we do our share to advance science, and it's always I mean, we accept about 20% of what gets submitted. That means you make one person happy and four unhappy, but whenever you make especially a young researcher happy, and then you are able to accept the paper, that is also that what motivates me, and I'm always glad when I can do this. As I said, the downside is for everyone you make happy, you make four unhappy.
That's part of the issue, but it sounds very, very motivating and interesting to hear that after 25 years, you still find the joy into finding new works and new
Yes.
papers. That's a very nice driver. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I very much liked this answer. It's indeed very motivating. And yeah, we have another question from chat. I will now read it. From Davy Sineve. Is there a difference between the evaluation of a communication and a research article? And then the follow-up question: if an author doubts about the right format, what would you advise?
In general, there is no big difference. If in doubt, I would advise to submit a longer paper that is a research article rather than a communication, because what we occasionally observe is that the referees say, this and that experiment is missing and the article is too short. This is what we see more than the other way around. Yeah, I rarely see referees stating that a paper is too long. Yeah, so if in doubt, make a longer story. Yeah, and put a bit more information in the paper. I think almost 80% of the submissions are now come as research articles. That means longer papers. The communications are in a minority. But what we can also see is that the acceptance rates of communications and research articles are absolutely identical. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter. But if in doubt, I suggest and recommend to submit a research article.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just recently experienced a very similar thing with another journal from Wiley, that our initial submission was kind of relatively short, and then with the comments from the referees, it got expanded twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a common thing to happen. Yeah, and I think, yes, it's really a good advice in the end. Yeah. So do we have any other questions? So the last one before we all have a free evening, Feierabend. yeah, maybe I just noticed, I was checking the metrics of the journal, and I was impressed that you have such a high acceptance rate. It's 19% that I checked for this year. It's a very, very good number, and I mean that's kind of encouraging. So do you think because people who are initially submitting the papers to Angewandte Chemie, they're already on a high level, or can you comment anything about this?
You mean the acceptance rate of 19%?
19, yeah, 19.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
It is a relatively high acceptance rate. I remember when I started at Angewandte in the year 2000, we had so about 40%, yeah, acceptance rate. So it's half of it, but when you compare to that we
Yes.
receive 15 times more papers, we always tried to publish as much as we can, yeah, without publishing excessively. And we always tried to keep the acceptance rate or the rejection rate when you turn it around on a quite similar level. Yeah, so we never thought about making big jumps. Yeah, it developed over the years. So every year the acceptance rate declined by 1%. um, but I mean, you can make a cut with what we publish. You say you publish 2,000 papers in a year and not a single more. But we never thought about doing this. Yeah, we say it's our job to publish and not to reject. And we try to publish as much as we can. There is a limit. Yeah, but yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's really considering this huge amount that you receive. This number is really impressive, 30,000. Yeah, it's still is an impressive acceptance rate. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, then.
Maybe
Yeah.
I ask the last question.
Okay.
Go. Thank you. Sorry. What is your take on the changing publication landscape with respect to open access publishing? Where do you think that is going? Was either publication charges or other ways of financing that?
I mean, open access is there. All new journal launches in the last couple of years are full open access journals. Angewandte Chemie is still a hybrid journal. You can publish either open access or not. I don't think we will return to a situation that we do not publish open access. Yeah. I think it will become more and more, especially in Germany. We have the deal, so authors in Germany can publish open access through the deal contract. It's yeah. Open access is the future of publishing, I think.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this entire evening.
Thank you for the invitation, and it was a pleasure, and it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm looking forward to your next paper and submission.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Maaß. Yeah, I also hope that we all enjoyed this, also the discussion at the end. It was very interesting and inspiring. And with this, I close the session and wish everyone a nice evening.